Poems to a Listener, readings and conversation with contemporary poets.
All day the blankets snapped and swelled on the line, roused by a hot spring wind. From there it witnessed the first sparrow, early flies lifting their sticky feet, and a green haze on the south-sloping hills. Clouds rode over the mountain. At dusk, I took the blanket in, and we slept, restless, under its fragrant weight.
Welcome to Poems to a Listener. I'm Henry Lyman, and in this half-hour program we'll be visiting with poet Jane Kenyon and listening to poems drawn mostly from her book, The Boat of Quiet Hours, published by Grey Wolf Press. The poem we just heard, entitled Wash, begins with the picture of a freshly washed blanket hanging on the clothesline in the freshly washed landscape of early spring.
In spring, I see that everything is stirring, everything is pushing and moving, and water is flowing, and clouds are moving fast, and everything seems in flux in the spring. And that's so much in contrast to the stillness of winter, when nothing seems to be happening. Frost flowers. Sap withdraws from the upper reaches of maples. The squirrel digs deeper and deeper in the moss to bury the acorns that fall all around, distracting him. I'm out here in the dusk, tired from teaching and a little drunk, where the wild asters, last blossoms of the season, straggle uphill. Frost flowers, I've heard them called. The white ones have yellow centers at first. Later they darken to a rosy copper. They're mostly done. Then the blue ones come on. It's blue all around me now, though the color has left with the sun. My sarcasm wounded a student today. Afterward I heard him running down the stairs. There is no one at home but me. And I'm not at home. I'm up here on the hill, looking at the dark windows below. Let them be dark. Some large bird calls down mountain, a cry astonishingly loud, distressing. I was cruel to him. It is a bitter thing. The air is damp and cold, and by now I am a little hungry. The squirrel is high in the oak, gone to his nest, and night has silenced the last loud rupture of the calm.
Night has silenced the last loud rupture of the calm. It sounds as if there's no calm at all, in a way. There's this bird cry.
Which is surprisingly human, actually, in its sound, as I heard it. And it seemed to me a remarkable coincidence that what was happening inside was also happening outside.
So the landscape was, in its own strange way, reflecting your fear?
Yes, my fear of teaching. It's not for me. And I was in the process of finding that out when I wrote this poem. Teacher. Sometimes there's gravel on the bend by Vernondale's store in North Sutton. I've learned to watch for that, and for the German shepherd who lies in the road at the foot of his master's drive. I've seen the farm market signs change with the weather. Potatoes to pumpkins to firewood, inquire within. My students have stayed the same. They still cut class to go skiing or fix their cars, and they continue to write. His flowing mane and proud bearing are timeless symbols of the pure blood coursing through his royal veins. Today the marsh is white with ice. The reeds look brittle and defeated. While I was at work, someone covered the 3 poplars by that cottage porch wrapped them in canvas against ice and wind, then cinched the canvas with ropes, making waists for the 3 lithe caryatids who seem to be holding up the roof while they wait for April thaw.
What are caryatids?
Well, they're figures. They're figures in Greek temples in which the pillars are the bodies of women, and the flutings on the pillars are the folds in their garments, and the caryatids are these pillar figures.
The poplars, like the caryatids, are holding up the roof of the house,
Yes.
of the cottage.
So they seem to me.
Are you doing that?
Myself.
In a way. Do you identify with them? Are you, in a way, waiting for that April thaw? The way.
Yes, I certainly was waiting. I was waiting for the end of term, waiting for it to be over.
The students seem very self-assured.
Yes, they're quite oblivious to what's going on, I think, inside me. Walking alone in late winter. How long the winter has lasted, like a Mahler symphony or an hour in the dentist's chair. In the fields, the grasses are matted and gray, making me think of June, when hay and vetch burgeon in the heat, and warm rain swells the globed buds of the peony. Ice on the pond breaks into huge plains. One sticks like a barge gone awry at the neck of the bridge. The reeds and shrubby brush along the shore gleam with ice that shatters when the breeze moves them. From beyond the bog, the sound of water rushing over trees felled by the zealous beavers who bring them crashing down. Sometimes, it seems, they do it just for fun. Those days of anger and remorse come back to me. You fidgeting with your ring, sliding it off, then jabbing it on again. The wind is keen coming over the ice. It carries the sound of breaking glass. And the sun, bright but not warm, has gone behind the hill. Chill, or the fear of chill, sends me hurrying home.
You go inside at the end, afraid of catching a chill. But that's not just the chill of the weather.
There can be inward chill as well.
It freezes one off, in a way.
Yes.
Is writing a way of getting through that chill?
I think it's a way of understanding. For me, in my life, it's a way of understanding what has happened to me. It's a way of making sense of what has happened to me. And I use my work to live my life. Thinking of Madame Bovary. The first hot April day, the granite step was warm. Flies droned in the grass. When a car went past, they rose in unison, then dropped back down. I saw that a yellow crocus bud had pierced a dead oak leaf, then opened wide. How strong its appetite for the luxury of the sun. Everyone longs for love's tense joys and red delights. And then I spied an ant dragging a ragged, disembodied wing up the warm brick walk. It must have been the Methodist in me that leaned forward, preceded by my shadow, to put a twig just where the ant was struggling with its own desire.
Why did you do that? Why did you put that twig in the ant's path? To stop it from what it wanted to do?
I don't know. I can't tell you why I did it.
The ant was dragging its prey,
Yes.
of what was left of its prey,
Yes.
up the walk towards the house,
Yes.
right?
I think it was to see what would happen. It's quite a cruel and terrible thing, really. One feels like Jehovah bending down. and squelching
supreme
something.
power.
Yes, yes. Quite arbitrary. The sandy hole. The infant's coffin, no bigger than a bread box. The young father steps backward from the sandy hole, eyes wide and dry, his hand over his mouth. No one dares to come near him, even to touch his sleeve.
His eyes are almost like that hole, gaping.
Dry. His grief is completely held inside.
And there's nothing that one can do. You want to somehow reach out and touch this man and comfort him, but it's quite impossible.
But you can't. You know that you cannot. Grief, after all, is a very solitary thing and has to be worked through in a deeply personal way.
The image of the bread box, the child's coffin no bigger than a bread box, it awakens strange feelings.
The child was an infant, a newborn, very small, and really there was a tiny, tiny coffin. November calf. She calved in the ravine, beside the green scummed pond. Full clouds and mist hung low. It was unseasonably warm. Steam rose from her head as she pushed and called. Her cries went echoing over the still lush field. The front feet came first, then the blossom nose, shell pink and glistening, then the broad forehead, flopping black ears and neck. She worked until the whole great length of him rushed out onto the ground, then turned and licked him with her wide pink tongue. He lifted up his head and looked around. The herd pressed close to see, then frolicked up the bank. It looked like revelry. The farmer tugged at the visor of his cap and set off for the barn, swinging in a wide arc a coiled, frayed, and knotted scrap of rope.
Here's this calf being born, and the rest of the herd, the other cows, are curious. They come down to see what's happened.
They really do. They do this.
They come down to see the newborn calf.
Oh, yes, they do. And they really frolic. They really do frolic. They buck and gamble, and they're really very gay.
Each time a calf is born.
Apparently. I mentioned it to the farmer, and he said, yes, this happens. And he said also that it's very common for one other member of the herd, not the mother of the calf, but one other member of the herd, to stay very close to the new calf and its mother as a sort of surrogate, so that if anything goes wrong, there's another sort of nurturing female nearby, and apparently this is very common. At the town dump. Sometimes I nod to my neighbor as he flings lath and plaster or cleared brush on the swelling pile. Talk is impossible. The dozer shudders toward us, flattening everything in its path. Last March I got stuck in the mud. Archie Portuguese was there, thin from the cancer that would kill him, with his yellow pickup, its sides akimbo for many loads. Archie pushed as I rocked the car. The clutch smelled hot. Then, with infallible timing, he jumped on the fender. Saved, I saw his small body in the rear view mirror get smaller as he waved. A boy pokes with a stick at a burnt-out sofa cushion. He brings the insides out with clear delight. Near where I stand, the toe of a boot protrudes from the sand. Today I brought the bug-perforated remains of my garden. A single ripe tomato, last fruit, immaculate, evaded harvest, and dangles from a vine. I offer it to oblivion with the rest of what was mine.
Everything is being abandoned. Archie Portigee, the sofa cushion, and finally, you yourself are surrendering the last yield of summer, the last tomato.
Yes, and something that's perfectly good.
With the rest of what is yours.
Yes.
Say.
Of what was mine, I
Of
say.
what was yours.
Yes.
Do you feel that anything is really yours?
Well, things ought to be much less important to us than they are. To me, anyway. I love my house. I love my study. I love all the little things I have around me. They're very dear to me, my garden, my cats. And yet I know that this is not everything. This is not the most important part. It's not the best part. And I think that we ought to learn to live more simply and to let things go, let them go. That people are more important than things, and we have to remember this. Inpatient. The young attendants wrapped you in a red velour blanket and pulled the strapping taut. Sedated on the stretcher and outside for the last time, you raised your head and sniffed the air like an animal. A wedge of geese flew honking over us. The sky leaned close. A drop of rain fell on your upturned face. I stood aside, steward of Grandma's red-letter New Testament and an empty vase. The nurse went with you through the sliding door. Without having to speak of it, we left the suitcase with your street clothes in the car.
Who is this?
This poem was written about my father, about his illness and death. This was, in fact, the last time he was hospitalized.
Everything seems so predetermined, almost automatic in the poem. I think of the sliding doors and the nurses going through with the stretcher.
Yes.
And just before he goes in, he sniffs the air.
Yes.
Like an animal.
He really lifted his head a little and sniffed the air. It smelled good to him. It was a pleasure to him. I could see that.
I guess he knew that he was going in permanently.
I think he did.
And you knew.
Yes. Campers leaving. Summer 1981. Just now 2 chartered buses from Boston pulled majestically out onto Route 4. Dust settled along the back road. The dog stopped barking, turned 3 circles, and lay back down. Faces in every tinted window turned back for one last look at Ragged Mountain. The sun had cleared the peak. It was so bright they had to turn away. Soon, the noisy reconstruction of every family. Yesterday the phone rang at noon. Father, calling from the hospital, had something on his irradiated mind. Just what, he couldn't say. Not that he didn't try. He wept and gave the phone to Mother to say goodbye. All summer I watched the campers from the far shore. They learned to swim and sail, and how to cling to a tipped canoe. Some struggled the whole time, but finally failed. On the last day I heard a voice say simply, "I need the pole." When the wind is right, it seems that every word has been spoken to me.
How do you mean the phrase, when the wind is right, it seems that every word has been spoken to me?
Well, I really heard this phrase so clearly. I need the pole.
It was said by a canoer.
It was said by a canoer, but it was utterly clear to me, as if the person saying this had been 2 feet from me.
But in fact, they were way across the lake.
Way across the water.
Could that have been what your father was trying to say to you on the phone?
I think it does parallel.
I need the pole.
I need the pole. I think that does parallel his reaching out to me and saying, trying to say something to me, and failing to say it, and needing help.
What would that pole be?
There wasn't one. That's just the trouble. Depression. A mote, a little world, dusty, dusty. The universe is dust. Who can bear it? Christ comes. The women feed him, bathe his feet with tears, bring spices, find the empty tomb, burst out to tell the men, are not believed.
What does this poem come out of?
Being depressed and sitting and staring, and one sees dust motes in a shaft of sunlight.
It makes you think of the universe, the dust.
Yes, I saw each one of those dust motes as a little world itself in which people were suffering.
How does the story of Christ's resurrection pertain?
Well, Christ comes into the world and we think, things will be getting better. The women who surround him see him and know that he is risen. And they feel better already. And they rush out to tell the apostles, and no one will believe them. Their assertion was rejected, presumably because they were women.
The apostles would say, oh, they're just women.
They're
They just hallucinated.
They're only women. We know that women are hysterical, see things.
They see things.
Yes, they do see things. Quite true. Apple dropping into deep early snow. A jay settled on a branch, making it sway. The one shriveled fruit that remained gave way to the deepening drift below. I happened to see it the moment it fell. Dusk is eager and comes early. A car creeps over the hill. Still in the dark, I try to tell if I am numbered with the damned, who cry indignant, Lord, when did we see you?
You see so much in this poem. The apple dropping into early snow. And yet you're worried about not seeing enough.
I'm worried about being insufficiently aware.
You worry about being metaphysically blind, in a sense? Or?
Yes, yes.
Yet that apple falling seems to hold a particular truth.
I think what I had in mind was that in the fall of this thing, I was made to think of my own demise. And then what? And then what? Portrait of a figure near water. Rebuked, she turned and ran uphill to the barn. Anger, the inner arsonist, held a match to her brain. She observed her life. Against her will, it survived the unwavering flame. The barn was empty of animals. Only a swallow tilted near the beams, and bats hung from the rafters the roof sagged between. Her breath became steady where, years past, the farmer cooled the big tin amphory of milk. The stone trough was still filled with water. She watched it and received its calm. So it is when we retreat in anger. We think we burn alone and there is no balm. Then water enters, though it makes no sound.
Anger is a terrible state of mind, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is. The anger is consuming her, and it's painful.
Then the water enters. What is it?
It is, first of all, itself. In this barn, no longer used, the water is still filling this cement cooler. There's something calming about the sound of falling water. Who knows why?
You say in the poem, we think we burn alone. Then water enters.
There is comfort in the water. There is a presence which is comforting in the water. And that just says, don't worry, don't worry. Don't be upset.
Almost a kind of grace?
It is like grace. I mean, it is like this sudden calming. Things. The hen flings a single pebble aside with her yellow reptilian foot. Never in eternity the same sound, a small stone falling on a red leaf. The juncture of twig and branch scarred with lichen is a gate we might enter, singing. The mouse pulls batting from 100-year-old quilt. She chewed a hole in a blue star to get it, and now she thrives. Now is her time to thrive. Things, simply lasting, then failing to last. Water, a blue heron's eye, and the light passing between them. Into light all things must fall, glad at last to have fallen.
That light, is that like the water in the foregoing poem?
Yes, I guess it is. It's the matrix. It's the thing which takes us in.
And what is between ourselves and other people and...
It's there, but sometimes we don't see it or forget to look for it.
And the poem seems to say that we can enter it by way of details like that, the twig where it joins the branch, the gate we enter singing.
Yes, in paying attention to the physical world somehow, we sometimes, for a few moments, enter something very wonderful, which is just out of sight or just out of hearing.
And if everyone felt that way, if everyone were open to the moment-by-moment miraculousness of things as they happen,
I think that our lives would feel very different. But what happens is that there are so many needs that are pressing on us that we lose the rest. We lose the rest unless we make a real effort to give time to it and not to forget it.
We've been visiting with poet Jane Kenyon and listening to poems drawn mostly from her book, The Boat of Quiet Hours, published by Grey Wolf Press. I'm Henry Lyman. Thanks for being with us.
Poems to a Listener was produced by WFCR, Amherst, Massachusetts, with technical assistance by Sheldon Katzman. Financial assistance was provided by the Massachusetts Council on the Arts and Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Massachusetts Foundation for Humanities and Public Policy.